"Don't scream," Claire Bennett whispered, because the enormous black wolf standing beside her bed looked far more terrified than she was. Thunder cracked over Blackwood Castle hard enough to rattle the window panes, and the animal flinched as though the sky itself had called its name. Before Claire could move, the wolf crossed the tiny room in 2 silent strides, climbed onto the mattress, and shoved its massive head beneath her blanket. Claire froze. For several seconds, she could only stare at the broad black shoulders occupying half her bed. Another flash turned the room silver. The thunder followed almost instantly. The wolf pressed closer, trembling beneath the blanket. "You're afraid," she breathed. One amber eye appeared above the edge of the quilt, offended enough that Claire almost laughed. Almost. Then she noticed the silver clasp around its neck. A crown wolf beneath a crescent moon. The royal crest. Her breath caught. Every servant in Blackwood Castle knew that symbol. Every wolf in the Northern Territories knew what it meant. This wasn't some animal that had wandered in from the forest. This was the wolf of Nathaniel Blackwood, the Alpha King. The same king whose arrival could silence a banquet hall. The same ruler Claire had watched powerful alphas bow to without being asked. And somehow, on the worst storm of the season, his wolf had slipped away from the royal wing, crossed nearly 200 feet of dark corridor, found the smallest room in the servants' quarters, and hidden beneath an Omega's blanket. Claire should have called the guards. Instead, she slowly rested her palm against the wolf's head. The fur beneath her fingers was surprisingly soft and rain-cold. "It's only thunder," she murmured. "It can't hurt you in here." The wolf went still. Claire felt its breathing beneath her hand, quick at first, then gradually slower. Outside, rain swept against the glass, while wind sighed around the castle towers. Another rumble rolled across the hills. The wolf's ears flattened, but this time it didn't shake. It simply pushed its head more firmly beneath her hand. Something tightened inside Claire's chest. All her life, she had been told Omegas were meant to stand behind stronger wolves, to remain quiet, useful, unnoticed. Yet the most powerful wolf in the kingdom had come to her when it was frightened. Why? Claire didn't know. Then footsteps thundered down the corridor. "Search every room," a guard shouted. "The king is missing." Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. The wolf lifted its head. For one suspended second, they stared at each other. Then the door handle began to turn. The door opened 3 inches before Claire found her voice. "I am changing," she called, pulling the blanket higher as the enormous wolf flattened itself beside her. The guard outside stopped immediately. "Forgive me, Miss Bennett. Have you seen anything unusual?" Claire looked down. 2 amber eyes watched her from beneath the quilt. "No," she said, and hated how loudly the words seemed to land. After a brief silence, the guard apologized and moved on. Only when his footsteps faded did Claire breathe again. She lifted the blanket. "You just made me lie to the royal guard." The wolf blinked. Claire narrowed her eyes. "Do not look innocent. You are terrible at it." His ears twitched, and for one strange second she wondered whether the most feared wolf in the Northern Territories understood every word. By morning, the storm had weakened to a steady rain, and the wolf was gone. Claire found no footprints, no broken latch, nothing except several black hairs on her quilt and the lingering certainty that she had not dreamed it. She dressed quickly in her plain gray uniform and hurried toward the servants' dining hall. Blackwood Castle was already awake. Nearly 300 people worked behind its stone walls, yet Claire had mastered the art of moving among them unnoticed. Being an Omega helped. In a court that admired rank, strength, and powerful bloodlines, Claire Bennett possessed none of those things. She carried breakfast trays, changed linens, polished silver, and remembered which elderly servants needed warmer tea on cold mornings. Animals liked her. Frightened children trusted her. Neither talent impressed the royal court. "Careful, Claire." Vanessa Whitmore's smooth voice stopped her near the grand staircase. Vanessa stood surrounded by 3 noble she-wolves dressed for the morning council reception. Her cream-colored coat probably cost more than Claire earned in a year. "Those flowers are for the royal table, not the servants' quarters." Claire tightened her grip on the vase. I know where they belong. Vanessa smiled as though Claire had performed a charming trick. Good. Then perhaps today you can manage being invisible. Claire lowered her gaze and continued walking. She had learned years ago that dignity did not always require an answer. Sometimes it meant refusing to let cruelty decide who you became. She entered the great hall just as the royal doors opened. Conversation vanished. Nathaniel Blackwood stepped inside. Tall, composed, dressed in black, he carried authority without needing to display it. Claire had seen seasoned alphas straighten when he passed. This morning, however, she noticed something no one else seemed to see. Nathaniel looked exhausted. His gaze swept across the room and stopped on her. Claire nearly dropped the flowers. Those eyes. Amber, steady, unmistakable. Nathaniel said nothing, but something flickered across his face before he looked away. Claire's pulse quickened. Outside, distant thunder rolled beyond the mountains. Nathaniel's hand tightened once at his side. Then he turned and left the hall. By late afternoon, Claire had almost convinced herself that the moment in the great hall meant nothing. Kings looked at servants. Wolves had amber eyes. Storms made people tired. There were reasonable explanations for everything, and Claire repeated them while folding fresh linens in the eastern corridor. Then thunder murmured beyond the castle walls, and every explanation disappeared. Across the corridor, Nathaniel Blackwood stopped walking. It lasted less than a second. His shoulders stiffened, his fingers closed around the edge of his coat, and his attention shifted toward the nearest window. Royal Beta Ethan Cole continued speaking beside him, apparently noticing nothing. Nathaniel recovered immediately. The Alpha King moved on with the same controlled stride that made everyone else step aside. But Claire had seen it. More importantly, Nathaniel knew she had seen it. His gaze found hers before he disappeared around the corner. That evening, Claire returned to her room with an uneasy feeling she could not explain. Rain began shortly after midnight. She lay awake listening to drops tap against the window until a low rumble traveled across the hills. Then came a soft scrape outside her door. Claire sat upright. "You cannot be serious," she whispered. The latch shifted. A black nose appeared first, followed by two familiar amber eyes. The enormous wolf slipped inside and nudged the door closed behind him with remarkable care. Claire stared. "You know how doors work?" The wolf ignored the question and crossed directly toward her bed. "No. Absolutely not. We are establishing rules." Lightning flashed. Thunder answered. The wolf jumped onto the mattress and buried his head beneath the blanket. Claire pressed her lips together, fighting a smile. "That is not a rule." One ear appeared. Claire sighed and rested her hand between his ears. His body remained tense beneath the thick black fur. "It is only thunder," she murmured. "You are safe here." The words changed something. His breathing slowed. His eyes closed. Claire gently stroked the fur behind one ear, and her fingertips encountered a narrow ridge beneath it. A scar. The instant she touched it, warmth rushed through her palm. Claire gasped. The room vanished. For one heartbeat, she saw firelight reflected against rain. A small boy stood beneath a stone archway, soaked and shaking. Somewhere beyond him, a woman called his name. "Nathaniel." Thunder exploded overhead. Fear flooded Claire so suddenly that she could barely breathe. Then the vision shattered. She jerked her hand away. The wolf raised his head. His amber eyes were wide now, not frightened by the storm, but by her. "I am sorry," Claire whispered. "I did not mean to see that." He stared at her with an intelligence no ordinary animal could possess. Outside, another flash illuminated the room. This time, he did not hide. He watched Claire instead. Slowly, almost cautiously, the wolf lowered his head back onto the blanket and pushed the scarred side of his face beneath her open palm. Claire stopped breathing. Whatever secret lived inside that memory, he had just chosen not to run from her. Claire did not sleep. The storm weakened sometime before dawn, but the memory remained vivid behind her eyes. Rain, firelight, a frightened boy, and a woman calling Nathaniel's name. The wolf stayed beside her until the first gray light touched the window. Then Claire blinked, and everything changed. Where the enormous black wolf had been resting, Nathaniel Blackwood now stood near the window, already dressed in the dark clothes he had worn the previous evening, as if the magic of shifting had returned everything except his composure. Claire pulled the blanket around her shoulders and stared at him. The Alpha King did not look frightening now. He looked guarded. "What did you see?" His voice was quiet. Claire swallowed.
"A boy. Then—"
"Firelight. Someone calling your name." Nathaniel turned toward her so quickly that her pulse jumped. "What else?" "Nothing." His eyes searched hers. Claire could almost see the walls rising behind them, one careful layer at a time. "You will speak of this to no one." It was not shouted. Somehow, the softness made the command heavier. Claire lowered her feet to the floor. "I was not planning to."
"Not Ethan."
"Not the healers. Not another servant." "I understand." Nathaniel studied her as though waiting for bargaining, curiosity, or fear. Claire offered none. She had spent enough of her life being judged for things she could not control. She would not do the same to him. "Your secret is safe." Something shifted in his expression. "You are not going to ask why? Would you answer?" Silence. Claire nodded. "Then I will not ask." Nathaniel looked toward the rain-streaked window. For a man who ruled thousands of wolves, he suddenly seemed uncertain what to do with simple kindness. "People mistake weakness for opportunity," he said at last, "especially in a king." Claire thought of Vanessa telling her to remain invisible. People mistake many things for weakness. His gaze returned to her. "You do not. I think being afraid of something and being weak are different things." Nathaniel went very still. No one had ever spoken to him that plainly in Claire's presence. Perhaps no one had dared. A faint rumble sounded far beyond the mountains. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. Then, to Claire's surprise, he glanced toward her bed. She followed his gaze. "Your wolf wants to stay." "My wolf does not make royal decisions." Claire almost smiled. "Apparently, he makes bedroom decisions." Nathaniel's stern expression cracked for half a second before he caught it. The change was so unexpected that warmth stirred in Claire's chest. He walked toward the door, but stopped with his hand above the latch. His shoulders tightened. Claire could sense the invisible struggle inside him. "He does not want to leave," Nathaniel admitted. "Why?" Claire asked. Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the king had returned to his face. "That is what concerns me." He stepped into the corridor and closed the door behind him. Claire remained still, listening to his footsteps fade. Several seconds passed. Then she heard them stop. Nathaniel had made it barely 20 feet before his wolf began fighting to come back. For the next 3 weeks, the weather over Blackwood Castle became Claire's unlikely calendar. Clear skies meant Nathaniel remained entirely the Alpha King, distant and composed, moving through council meetings with Ethan Cole at his side while Claire passed through the same halls carrying linens or flowers. Rain meant something different. The first evening thunder returned, Claire heard one quiet scratch at her door. When she opened it, the black wolf sat in the corridor pretending he had not been waiting. "You know you could knock," Claire whispered. He walked past her without permission and settled beside the foot of her bed. By the second storm, he chose the rug near her chair. By the third, he rested beside the bed while Claire read aloud from an old adventure novel. She never knew whether he understood the story, but whenever she stopped reading, one amber eye opened until she continued. Their strange routine became almost ordinary. Claire kept a towel near the door for his rain-soaked fur. She learned that he disliked loud clocks, loved the warmth of the fireplace, and became deeply offended when she called him dramatic. Most importantly, she never treated his fear like something shameful. When thunder rolled across the hills, she simply rested her hand between his ears and continued whatever she had been doing. Slowly, the trembling stopped coming first.
"Trusted."
Nathaniel changed too. In human form, he began noticing Claire in places where he once would have passed without a glance. One morning, she found a new stack of books outside the servants' library with no note attached. Another afternoon, Nathaniel paused beside her in the courtyard. "The wolf dislikes the book about sailing," he said without looking at her. Claire nearly dropped the basket in her hands. The wolf? Yes. Of course. She hid her smile. And what does the king think? Nathaniel finally looked at her. The king has no opinion. Naturally. He walked away before she could see whether he was smiling. Claire told herself their secret changed nothing. He was still the king. She was still an Omega servant whose room was barely 12 feet across. Yet every storm blurred that distance a little more. Nathaniel began remembering the quiet even when the sky was clear. Claire's voice moving through a story, the steady warmth of her hand, the astonishing absence of expectation. Everyone else wanted something from him. Loyalty rewarded. Power borrowed. Status granted. Claire asked for nothing. That frightened him in a way thunder never could. Then Vanessa Whitmore noticed. It happened during an evening reception when clouds gathered beyond the western windows. Nathaniel left the hall before the first thunder sounded. Vanessa watched him go. Minutes later, she saw Claire quietly excuse herself through another doorway. Suspicion sharpened her expression. She waited, then followed. Claire never heard the footsteps behind her. She reached the servants' corridor just as distant thunder rolled over the castle. At the far end, the enormous black wolf was already waiting outside her door. Claire smiled despite herself and hurried toward him. Neither of them saw Vanessa standing in the shadows. But Vanessa saw everything. Vanessa said nothing that night. That was what made her dangerous.
By
sunrise, she had transformed suspicion into a story the royal council was ready to believe. Claire was summoned from the breakfast hall before she had finished her tea. 2 palace attendants escorted her to a small council chamber where Vanessa stood beside 3 senior advisors, wearing an expression of practiced concern. Claire Bennett, one advisor said, "You are accused of using forbidden scent magic to influence the royal wolf." Claire stared at him. "I do not possess scent magic." Vanessa lowered her eyes. "Then explain why His Majesty's wolf repeatedly enters your quarters during storms." The room became painfully quiet. Claire understood immediately. Vanessa had followed her. Worse, Claire could not defend herself without revealing Nathaniel's secret. "I cannot explain it," Claire said. "Cannot or will not? I have never used magic against the king." That was the truth, but truth sounded fragile when surrounded by people who had already chosen a more exciting lie. Nathaniel could have ended the accusation with a sentence. Unfortunately, he was nearly 40 miles north with Ethan Cole, settling a territorial dispute between 2 neighboring packs. Vanessa had chosen her moment carefully. By noon, rumors had spread through the castle. Claire felt them following her through every corridor. The invisible Omega was suddenly visible for all the wrong reasons. Some servants avoided her. Others whispered that she had enchanted the king. Claire kept her head high. She would not purchase her safety with Nathaniel's humiliation. Late that afternoon, the council reached its decision. Claire would leave Blackwood territory until Nathaniel returned and reviewed the matter personally. It was called temporary removal. To Claire, it felt remarkably like exile. She was given 1 small traveling case and a seat in a covered carriage headed toward a village 12 miles beyond the castle. Margaret Hale, the elderly healer, found Claire near the gate. "You could tell them the truth," Margaret said softly. Claire looked toward the darkening sky. "It is not my truth to tell." Margaret's lined face softened. "That answer may cost you." "Then it costs me." Claire climbed into the carriage. Vanessa watched from the castle steps, satisfied. The gates opened. Rain began less than a mile into the journey. Claire leaned against the window as Blackwood Castle disappeared behind gray sheets of water. Thunder rolled across the valley. Her first thought was not for herself. It was for Nathaniel. Nearly 40 miles away, Nathaniel stood over a map while Ethan explained the final terms of the territorial agreement. Lightning flashed beyond the lodge windows. Nathaniel's wolf stirred uneasily. He expected the familiar fear. Instead, something colder rushed through the bond.
Absence. Alarm. Claire.
Nathaniel straightened. Something is wrong. Ethan stopped speaking. With the negotiations? With Claire. Nathaniel did not know how he knew. He only knew his wolf was no longer reacting to the storm. It was searching for the one person who had taught it that storms could end. Nathaniel crossed to the door. "Your Majesty, the weather is getting worse." Nathaniel opened it anyway. Rain swept across the porch. His wolf surged forward with one clear instinct: find her. Back on the southern road, Claire's carriage slowed as thunder shook the valley. She looked through the rain-covered window and saw a dark shape racing toward them from the distant hills. The carriage driver pulled the horses to a stop as the dark shape emerged through the rain. Claire knew him before she saw the silver royal clasp at his neck. The black wolf slowed in the middle of the road, soaked from the storm, breathing hard after covering nearly 40 miles from the northern lodge. For a moment, Claire forgot the council, Vanessa, and the whispers that had followed her from the castle. She opened the carriage door. "Nathaniel?" The wolf crossed the remaining distance immediately. Claire stepped down beneath the cold rain, and he pressed his head against her hands, as if confirming she was truly there. Thunder rolled overhead. He barely reacted. Claire stared at him. For weeks, every storm had sent him searching for shelter. Tonight, he had run directly into one. "You came all this way," she whispered. The wolf looked toward Blackwood Castle, then back at Claire. His meaning was unmistakable. They were going home. By the time they reached the castle gates, Ethan Cole had caught up on horseback with several royal attendants behind him. Word of Nathaniel's return traveled faster than the carriage. Council members gathered beneath the covered entrance. Servants filled the windows. Vanessa stood near the front, her confidence fading when Claire stepped down beside the Alpha King's wolf. "Your Majesty," one advisor began carefully. Miss Bennett was temporarily removed pending investigation. Nathaniel shifted back into human form behind the privacy screen brought by his attendants and emerged moments later in dry royal clothing. His expression was calm, which Claire had learned was far more serious than anger. "On whose authority?" he asked. No one answered immediately. Vanessa stepped forward. "We were protecting you. She may have influenced your wolf with forbidden magic." Nathaniel looked at Claire. She stood in her damp traveling cloak, one hand still resting near the black fur left on her sleeve. "Claire," he said quietly, "why did you not tell them the truth?" She met his eyes. "Because it was yours to tell." Silence settled over the entrance. Something in Nathaniel's face softened before he turned toward the council. "There was no magic." Vanessa's confidence faltered. "Then why would your wolf repeatedly seek an Omega servant?" Lightning illuminated the courtyard. Thunder followed. Everyone instinctively looked toward Nathaniel. Claire felt her heart tighten. He could deny everything. He could preserve the flawless image expected of a king. Instead, Nathaniel stepped closer to her. "Because my wolf is afraid of storms." No one moved. Even Ethan looked surprised. Nathaniel continued, his voice steady. "Claire discovered that weakness and protected it when she could have used it against me. She asked for nothing. She told no one. Even when silence cost her place here, she kept my confidence." Vanessa opened her mouth, but Nathaniel raised one hand. "You mistook kindness for manipulation because you could not imagine kindness without ambition." Another rumble crossed the valley. Nathaniel's shoulders tightened almost imperceptibly. Then his wolf surfaced again, the transformation carrying him into the familiar black form. Before the entire court, he walked to Claire and lowered his enormous head against her side. Claire rested her palm between his ears. The tension left him almost instantly.
No spell.
No command, only trust. Around them, the castle fell completely silent. For the first time, everyone saw what Claire had understood from the beginning. The strongest creature in the kingdom did not come to her because she controlled him. He came because, with her, he felt safe. The storm passed before midnight, but the silence it left behind felt different. By morning, no one in Blackwood Castle looked at Claire as though she were invisible. She wished they would. Servants lowered their voices when she passed. Council members watched her with new curiosity. Vanessa remained absent from breakfast, while Nathaniel had already ordered a formal review of the accusation against Claire. Yet none of that troubled her as much as Margaret Hale waiting outside her room. The elderly healer carried a small wooden box and an expression Claire could not read. "Walk with me," Margaret said. They crossed the quiet eastern courtyard, where rain still clung to the roses like tiny pieces of glass. Nathaniel joined them beneath the covered walkway. His face became guarded when he saw Margaret. "You know something," he said. Margaret nodded. "I know that everyone has misunderstood your wolf for years." Nathaniel's eyes narrowed. Claire remained beside him. Margaret opened the box and removed an old silver medallion bearing the Blackwood crest. "Your mother gave me this the year before she died." Nathaniel went still. Margaret continued gently. "You were 7 when the uprising reached the castle. A storm covered the valley that night. You were hidden beneath the western stairs while your mother tried to keep you calm. Thunder was the last sound your young wolf connected with the moment your world changed." Claire remembered the vision. The rain. The firelight. The woman calling Nathaniel's name. "So, he is afraid of thunder because it reminds him of that night," Claire said. "Not exactly." Margaret looked at Nathaniel. He learned that thunder meant someone he loved might disappear. The words settled heavily between them. Nathaniel turned toward the courtyard. His expression remained controlled, but Claire saw his hand close slowly at his side. Margaret's voice softened. "For years, healers tried to remove the fear. We used herbs, meditation, controlled exposure, every accepted method we knew. Nothing worked because we were treating the sound." She looked at Claire. "You treated the loneliness." Claire shook her head. "I did not treat anything. I sat with him." "Exactly." Nathaniel looked at Claire then, and something unguarded passed through his eyes. Margaret reached for Claire's hand and gently turned her palm upward. A faint silver crescent shimmered beneath the skin. So subtle Claire had never noticed it. Nathaniel inhaled sharply. The same pale light appeared along the old scar behind his ear. "What is that?" Claire whispered. Margaret smiled. "An old bond. Older than royal titles. It does not awaken through command or rank. It responds when two wolves recognize safety in each other." Claire's heartbeat quickened. "A mate bond?" Nathaniel asked. Margaret nodded. Claire expected the word to frighten her. Instead, she remembered wet black fur beneath her fingers, amber eyes watching her over a blanket, and a king who had crossed 40 miles through the very storm he feared because he thought she was in danger. Nathaniel stepped closer, but stopped before reaching for her. "Claire, whatever this bond means, you owe me nothing." Her eyes lifted to his. That mattered more than any royal declaration could have. Thunder murmured far beyond the mountains, faint and distant. Nathaniel heard it.
Claire knew he did, but he did not look toward the sky.
He looked at her, and for the first time, his wolf remained completely calm. 3 weeks later, Blackwood Castle had learned a new kind of quiet. Claire no longer carried breakfast trays or disappeared into servant corridors, but she had refused every grand suite Nathaniel offered her. Instead, she chose a sunny room overlooking the eastern gardens, close enough to the library that she could smell old paper whenever. Someone opened its doors. The council formally cleared her name, and Vanessa Whitmore left the royal court after admitting that suspicion and jealousy had shaped her accusation. Nathaniel offered Claire a public title immediately.
Claire asked for time.
He gave it without argument. That mattered. The mate bond between them remained a gentle warmth rather than a command, something neither of them needed to rush. Nathaniel still ruled with the same steady authority. Claire was still Claire, the Omega who noticed frightened animals, lonely servants, and people everyone else overlooked. Some things did not need changing. Then, one evening, clouds gathered beyond the mountains. Claire noticed them from her window while reading beside the fireplace. Rain began softly, tapping against the glass. She waited. No scratching came at her door. No enormous black wolf slipped through the latch. Claire smiled to herself. Perhaps Nathaniel had finally decided that a king should enter rooms with dignity. Thunder rolled across the valley. A moment later came 2 careful knocks. Claire set down her book and opened the door. Nathaniel stood in the corridor without his crown, guards, or formal coat. He looked almost ordinary, except Nathaniel Blackwood could never truly look ordinary. His hands rested at his sides. His expression was serious. "My wolf says he is afraid of the storm," he said. Claire glanced toward the window. "Your wolf?" "Yes." Thunder sounded again. Nathaniel's eyes flickered toward the ceiling for half a second. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Only the wolf?" Nathaniel considered the question with the gravity of a royal negotiation. "The king may have concerns as well." Claire laughed softly. Something in his shoulders relaxed at the sound. Weeks earlier, he would have hidden the fear. Tonight, he had knocked on her door and named it. That felt more courageous than pretending it had never existed. Claire stepped aside. "Then both of you may come in." Nathaniel entered, but stopped near the fireplace instead of assuming he belonged there. Claire appreciated that too. She returned to her chair and lifted the book. "I was reading. The sailing story?"
No.
"Your wolf complained too much." "A sensible wolf." Claire smiled. Another flash brightened the windows, followed by thunder. Nathaniel drew a slow breath. Claire held out her hand. He looked at it, then placed his hand gently in hers. The silver crescent on Claire's palm warmed. A matching light shimmered near Nathaniel's scar. No ceremony followed. No court watched. There was only rain, firelight, and two people choosing trust without being ordered by destiny. Nathaniel sat beside her while Claire continued reading. After several pages, she felt his breathing settle. Outside, the storm moved over the castle and toward the distant hills. "Claire," he said quietly. "Yes. I spent my entire life believing home was something a king had to protect." She closed the book and looked at him. Nathaniel's expression softened. "I think I was wrong." Claire squeezed his hand.
He did not need to explain.
The castle had given him walls. The crown had given him power. But neither had ever taught the frightened wolf inside him that it was safe to close its eyes during a storm. Claire had done that without asking who he was, what he owned, or what he could give her. Thunder sounded once more in the distance. Nathaniel did not flinch. He simply stayed beside her, and Claire understood that destiny had not brought them together because one was powerful and the other was weak. It had brought them together because true strength could be gentle, and sometimes the safest place in the world was simply beside someone who understood.